The two largest Crip gangs in Long Beach are the Insane Crips and the Rolling 20s Crips. The Insane Crips, or ICG, are a notorious African-American street gang rooted in the heart of Long Beach, California. Their story begins in the neighborhood around 21st Street and Lewis Avenue, but over time, their influence spread across central Long Beach. Identified by their affiliation with the three X-Trays, the Insane Crips are often recognized by their signature black and gray colors and their affinity for Oakland Raiders gear. The gang is divided into three main cliques, each with its own role and history. At the core are the big Insane Crips, composed of the original members from 21st Street who laid the gang's foundation. Then came the Young Foundation Crew, YFC, representing the second generation. Finally, the Baby Insane Crips, BIC, emerged in the early 1990s as a younger, more modern extension of the gang. While all three cliques are under the Insane Crips umbrella, each operates within its own defined space, developing distinct identities. Among the cliques, the Baby Insane Crips stand out for adopting the Cleveland Indians as their symbol and wearing red as their primary color. Notably, Trey D, a member of the iconic hip-hop group Thai Siders, is a verified original member of the Insane Crips from the 21st Street clique, further embedding the gang's legacy into the culture of Long Beach. Beyond their home turf, the gang's influence has spread, as seen with the formation of the 21st Young Guns Crips in Lancaster, California. Once, the Insane Crips and the Rolling 20s Crips were strong allies connected by shared neighborhoods and family ties. But by the 1980s, those bonds were shattered by internal strife and escalating tensions, leading to a fierce and bloody rivalry that claimed lives on both sides. The Insane Crips also face ongoing conflicts with the West Coast Crips and Barrio Longo, a powerful Latino gang in Long Beach. The Rolling 20s Crips are a prominent African-American gang rooted in East Long Beach, California. Their home turf lies south of 21st Street, stretching between Long Beach Boulevard and Orange Avenue. Known for their signature black and gold colors, they often sport Pittsburgh Steelers or New Orleans Saints gear, making their allegiance instantly recognizable. One of their most notable trademarks is their tattoos, with some members proudly wearing the Steelers emblem as a symbol of loyalty. The gang is organized into various cliques, each representing a specific street or neighborhood. Among them are the Young 20 Locks, the younger generation carrying on the Rolling 20s legacy. Their fame extends far beyond the streets of Long Beach, thanks to their association with hip-hop legends like Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, Daz Dillinger, Goldie Lock, C-Note, and Domino. These connections have not only boosted their notoriety, but have also embedded the Rolling 20s into the cultural fabric of the area. In the past, the Rolling 20s Crips and the Insane Crips were allies operating as one unified group. But in the 1980s, disputes over territory drove a wedge between them. The Rolling 20s took control of the area south of 21st Street, while the Insane Crips claimed the north. Despite their ongoing rivalry, the two gangs have occasionally set aside their differences to face a common foe, the Barrio Longo gang. The story of the Longo gang isn't just about its history, but the community it shaped and fractured over decades. In Long Beach, California, the name Longo carries weight. For locals, it's synonymous with fear, survival, and an enduring legacy of gang culture. The gang's roots go back to the 1960s, though the exact details remain murky, hidden behind street codes and rumors. At its core, the Longo gang isn't a single entity. It's a collection of smaller groups united under the name Barrio Longo 13. The name itself pays homage to their hometown, with Longo being a slang term for Long Beach. As the gang's presence grew, it splintered into three major factions: East Side Longos, ESL 13, West Side Longos, WSL 13, and North Side Longos, NSL 13. Of the three, the East Side group has always been the largest and most dominant. By the 1970s, this structure solidified, and the Longos had firmly embedded themselves into the city's underbelly. But it was in the 1980s when their alignment with the Mexican Mafia, or La IM, marked a turning point. Joining the broader Sereno network tied them to one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the state. This affiliation amplified their power, allowing them to expand their influence beyond Long Beach to cities like Bakersfield, Washington, and even across the border into Tijuana, Mexico. With this rise came violent rivalries. The Longos developed a reputation for aggression, not just against their competitors, but also against other ethnic groups. Their attacks on Asian and Black communities, in particular, fueled resentment. It was this hostility that led to the formation of rival gangs, like the Tiny Rascals and the Asian Boys, who banded together to protect their own. One of the Longos' fiercest rivalries was with the Crips, especially the Rolling 20 Crips. Long Beach, already a patchwork of ethnic and territorial divides, became a battleground. The conflict spilled into areas like Vespucci Beach, known for its racial tension. By the 1990s, the violence escalated to a boiling point. The Longos frequently clashed not just with the Crips, but also with white supremacist groups who had claimed parts of Vespucci Beach. This was a dark time for the community, where innocent lives were often caught in the crossfire. The 1990s also brought devastating consequences for the Longos themselves. Law enforcement cracked down, sending many of their members to prison, but the gang's reach extended behind bars, where alliances and grudges continued to play out. Even with key leaders incarcerated, the Longos managed to rebuild, recruiting new members, often from local high schools. This cycle of violence and regeneration became a hallmark of their survival. Despite their resilience, the gang faced setbacks. By the mid-2000s, other gangs like the Culver City 13 and Terrortown 13 had begun to challenge their dominance in the harbor area. These rivalries pushed the Longos to the brink of extinction at one point, though they always found a way to claw back to relevance. There were moments of hope, brief as they were. In 2016, after years of bloodshed, a peace treaty was brokered between the West Side Longos and the East Side Insane Crips. Orchestrated largely by law enforcement, this truce aimed to bring calm to the streets. For a time, it worked. The violence waned and the community began to heal. But peace in gang territories is often fragile. By 2019, the truce had unraveled and tensions flared once more. Violence returned, with the Melanoma Street neighborhood becoming a hotspot. With the decline of the Crips in Vespucci Beach, the Longos have fewer rivals, giving them room to regroup and strengthen. Yet, their resurgence comes at a cost to the community. The ongoing gang violence leaves scars, both physical and emotional. Innocent lives are often caught in the crossfire, like Tanya Price, a tragic casualty of this unending cycle. The racial tensions, too, continue to simmer, a painful reminder of the fractures within the city. Police presence in Long Beach has increased in response to the violence, but solving the deeper issues remains elusive. But what happens when gang rivalries spill into the lives of innocents? On a quiet October evening in 2011, Cecilia and Antoine were walking home, just like any other night. The air was cool, the streets familiar, but the routine was shattered when three men approached them. One of the men asked, "Where are you from?" A question that, on the surface, seemed harmless but would soon spark a tragic series of events. Sensing trouble, Cecilia tried to de-escalate the situation. She told the men to leave them alone, but they wouldn't. Instead, they closed in, surrounding Antoine. The tension exploded into violence as the group began attacking him. As they walked away, one of the men hurled a racial slur and threatened the couple, warning them to stay out of the neighborhood. In the aftermath, Cecilia turned to check on Antoine. He looked disoriented, his steps unsteady. Then she saw it. His shirt was wet. Lifting it, she discovered a stab wound in his stomach. The knife had torn through vital organs, his liver, gallbladder, intestines, and major blood vessels. The damage was devastating. It was a fatal wound. Nearby, Olga, an employee at a local restaurant, noticed the couple walking by earlier. A few moments later, she saw three Latino men following them. One of them, Para, was a familiar face in the neighborhood. Olga's attention was drawn back when she heard a scream. Looking outside, she saw the man from the couple doubled over, clutching his stomach in pain. Detective Hugo Cortez of the Long Beach Police Department led the investigation into Antoine Johnson's murder. The crime scene was well lit, aiding witnesses and providing details. Cecilia identified Para from a photo lineup as one of the attackers. Para, a member of the Eastside Longos gang, had a criminal history and tattoos linking him to the gang, including the words Long Beach, a Playboy bunny, and a Grim Reaper. Graffiti around the crime scene, including slurs, further tied the attack to gang activity. In July 2012, Parra was charged with murder. Prosecutors argued the crime was gang-related and pointed to his prior criminal record, which exposed him to a harsher sentence. During the trial, eyewitnesses like Cecilia and another witness, Miss G, identified Parra as one of the attackers. A gang expert testified about the history of racial tensions between the East Side Longos and African American gangs like the Insane Crips, suggesting a possible motive for the attack. The expert also emphasized that such a crime would likely have been committed for the gang's benefit. Parra's defense team challenged the reliability of eyewitness testimony and brought in an expert to testify about its limitations. Parra himself denied involvement, claiming he wasn't even a gang member. Despite his defense, Parra was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 35 years to life in prison. The sentence reflected the severity of the crime and its devastating impact on the victim's family and the community. And while justice was served for Antoine, the streets of Long Beach were far from peaceful. In the summer of 2012, Harris and his friends were walking to the store when everything changed in an instant. A group of Hispanic men confronted them, and before anyone could react, one of the men pulled out a gun and started shooting. Harris's friend, Ajay, was killed in the chaos. The pain of losing Ajay was still fresh when, just weeks later, Harris was attacked again. This time, he was shot in the groin. He told police that his attackers were two men, one Mexican and one African American. Fast forward 2 years to July 28, 2015. That evening, three friends, Gabriela, Antonio, and Gilbert, were working on Antonio's car in a Long Beach parking lot. Antonio and Gilbert were Hispanic, and the atmosphere was calm until Harris, McNeese, and Jasmine approached. Harris and the others quickly sparked a heated argument with the group, exchanging racial slurs. Harris taunted them with the word chongos, a disrespectful term used against members of the Longo gang. Jasmine, who was the mother of Harris's child, stood by as the tension escalated. After the argument, Harris, McNeese, and Jasmine went back to the motel where McNeese was staying. Harris then returned to the parking lot, approached Antonio, Gabriela, and Gilbert, and ominously told them, "I have something for you." Then he disappeared. Afraid for their lives, Gabriela, Antonio, and Gilbert piled into their car, a Dodge Charger, and sped off. McNeese and Jasmine watched them leave, with McNeese making a racist remark as they drove away. Soon after, Harris and Webb arrived in a car, and they all chased after the Charger. Gabriela tried to lose them, parking the car to let Gilbert get out, but as he stepped outside, a loud bang echoed through the night. Panicking, Gilbert ducked and ran into a nearby alley for cover. Gabriela turned to see Harris standing outside a car, holding a large gun. More shots rang out, and Gabriela quickly drove off, desperate to escape. The car chasing her yelled a gang threat as they pursued her, but she managed to evade them by turning into a dark alley. Meanwhile, Gilbert's mom had been outside when the shooting started. She saw a man get out of a car and fire 2 shots at the Charger. The way he handled the gun stood out. He pumped it as he fired, a strange technique not typically used with standard firearms. Maria, who worked nearby, heard the gunfire and came outside to investigate. She later noticed a bullet hole in the building. When police arrived, they recovered bullet casings and fragments from the scene, confirming the building had been struck. An expert later explained the physics behind the shooting. They noted that when a gun is fired, the recoil can cause the bullet to veer upward, especially with rifles that have shortened barrels. This means that even if a shooter aims directly at a target, the bullet's trajectory can shift, making it harder to hit the intended mark. A month after the shooting, Webb's friend Andre Barrero was tragically killed outside a liquor store. Webb was devastated, overwhelmed with grief, and inconsolable at the scene. When questioned by police, Webb claimed that the killers were members of the Longo gang. Harris also pointed to a rival gang, suggesting the attackers were part of the Chongos. Around the same time, another tragedy unfolded. Anthony Holston, a member of the Rolling 20s Crips, was killed. Harris blamed Hispanic men, specifically members of the Longo gang, for Holston's death. On August 24, 2015, Robert and Richard were hanging out near a curb when violence struck again. Richard, a member of a local street gang, had a Wilma's tattoo marking his affiliation. Suddenly, A black Jeep sped down the alley, driven by McNeese's brother, with Harris and McNeese as passengers. As the Jeep approached, Robert and Richard tried to flee. The Jeep struck Robert, knocking him down and running him over. Richard managed to jump out of the way, but was still injured. The Jeep turned around, running over Robert a second time before speeding off. Robert survived but suffered devastating injuries, including a broken leg, a fractured pelvis, burns, and a severely injured foot. His recovery required a 2-week hospital stay. Later that same night, 17-year-old Isaac was riding his bike when the black Jeep reappeared. McNeese, Harris, and the others inside started yelling at him, asking where he was from. Before Isaac could respond, they opened fire. He was shot multiple times, sustaining wounds to his legs, hip, liver, kidneys, lungs, back, arm, and neck. After the attack, the shooter sped off, laughing and cheering. Isaac's sister found him bleeding and flagged down a car to rush him to the hospital. His recovery was grueling, lasting 2 years and requiring over 19 surgeries. Police recovered evidence from the scene, including bullet casings from a 9mm, .25 caliber, and .30 caliber gun, indicating the attackers were heavily armed and intent on causing severe harm. In 2015, James and Candace were dating. James was a member of the Bloods gang, while Candace had previously been involved with a member of the Rolling 20s Crips. This prior relationship created tension, with Knight, Candace's ex, continuing to harass her and confront James. On the night of September 7, 2015, Webb, Harris, McNeese, and 2 other women drove to James's neighborhood. They parked in a dark spot, and McNeese stepped out of the car. While James was talking with his cousin Anthony, a gunshot pierced the Knight. James was hit in the back and tragically died on the spot. After the shooting, McNeese returned to the car, seemingly proud of his actions. When one of his accomplices asked, "Did you do it?" McNeese replied, Yeah, man, I did it." His chilling confession, along with the .30 caliber bullet recovered at the scene, became critical evidence in the investigation. Later that month, Rodrigo and his girlfriend Maria were chatting with a friend outside an apartment building late at night. Unbeknownst to them, danger was lurking nearby. A black Jeep, carrying McNeese, Harris, and others, pulled up. After briefly stopping, the Jeep moved to a nearby alley, turning off its lights. Suddenly, gunfire erupted. A figure stepped out of the shadows, fired a shot at Rodrigo, and quickly returned to the Jeep, which sped away into the night. When the first shot rang out, Rodrigo instinctively shielded Maria from the gunfire. Tragically, he was struck in the chest and died on the scene. Police recovered bullet casings at the site, and ballistics tests linked the murder weapon to the earlier shooting of James. A subsequent search of Webb's home uncovered a sawed-off rifle with a .308 caliber cartridge. Ballistics confirmed this rifle was used in the shootings, and DNA evidence tied Harris to the weapon, further implicating him in the series of violent crimes. But what led Harris down such a violent path? His interrogation provided the answers. During the trial, the jury listened to a recording of Harris's interrogation. He explained that he, McNeese, and Jasmine had been walking past a group of Hispanic men who, according to Harris, made racist and gang-related threats. Harris believed these men were members of the Longos gang. When one of the men opened a car trunk, Harris panicked, convinced they were about to pull out a gun. After the tense confrontation, Harris, McNeese, and Webb drove around looking for revenge. They eventually spotted a Dodge Charger, and in a moment of rage, they attacked. Harris fired the fatal shots. Initially, he tried to shift the blame to his accomplices, but eventually he admitted to being the shooter. He confessed that his actions were fueled by anger and a need for retaliation after the death of his friend Borrero, who had allegedly been killed by Hispanic gang members. The night after Borrero's murder, Harris, McNeese, and Webb were driving a black Jeep. They came across 2 men drinking beer in an alley. Webb, consumed with anger, pointed out the men and suggested they become their next targets. McNeese's brother, who was driving, recklessly reversed the Jeep, hitting one of the men. Later that same night, Webb spotted someone riding a bicycle. He yelled, "That's a Mexican!" and fired at the person using both a handgun and a rifle. McNeese joined in, shooting at the victim with a smaller gun. Harris admitted he thought the person on the bike was a gang member. Regarding James R.'s murder, Harris described how James got into a fight with Little Pittsburgh and Baby Pittsburgh over a girl. One night, Webb drove Harris to an alley near James's house. Webb got out of the car and shot James with a large gun. Harris said Little Pittsburgh had planned the attack. As for Rodrigo P.'s murder, Harris claimed he was just trying to get home from a concert with McNeese and his brother when they picked up Webb, who seemed eager to cause trouble. While driving, they noticed a group of Hispanic people. Harris wanted to go home, but Webb insisted on confronting them. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Webb eventually turned on his friends and began cooperating with detectives. He revealed that McNeese and Harris frequently got drunk and went on rampages, deliberately targeting Hispanic people. Webb even confessed to crimes the police hadn't yet uncovered. One night, while driving back from Los Angeles, they saw a Hispanic man walking. Harris jumped out of the car and shot him. Harris, McNeese, and Webb received lengthy prison sentences for their violent crimes, including murder and attempted murder. Harris and McNeese were each sentenced to 85 years to life, while Webb received 95 years to life, reflecting the severity of their actions and ensuring they will likely spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Appreciate you watching. If you liked it, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.